Welcome to the Canyoneering Karma podcast. Your host, Rich Carlson, is here to take you on a journey of learning and exploration. So grab your gear and a rope and follow along.
Hi, thank you for tuning in. On this episode, we're going to be talking about canyon photography. With me, I have my good friend Adolfo Isassi, very experienced canyoneer and canyon photographer extraordinaire. How you doing today, Adolfo?
Pretty good. Rich, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. You know, Adolfo, every time I see the photos you come back with from your canyon adventures, I am so jealous. I have nothing that can compare to what you're able to do. I think back to the early days of my canyoneering, going all the way back into the 70s. I started with this little 110 camera, and I imagine some of our listeners won't even know what a 110 camera is. It was cheap. It didn't take very good photos, but I didn't really care because it was cheap. I even remember going through canyons with these little disposable 35 millimeter cameras. Again, they didn't take very good photos, but if I trashed one, it was no big deal because they were cheap. Sometime in the 90s, I finally invested in this nice 35 millimeter Canyon Rebel camera. It took some amazing photos, but I made the mistake of taking it on an adventure in Corsica. I had it in a waterproof Pelican box, dropped it over a waterfall inside of my pack. When I got out the other side of the pool, the latches had popped open. My camera was soaked. I only got one good photo out of that entire trip in Corsica. So after that, I bought this waterproof 35 millimeter Canon camera. It was definitely waterproof, but it didn't take very good pictures. Oh, I just noticed I'm blaming the camera for everything. It couldn't possibly be my fault that I'm getting bad photos. But maybe a good place for us to start our conversation is with some of the cameras that are available now. I mean, everything is digital, and there's some pretty decent waterproof cameras, I believe. So do you have any personal thoughts on that, recommendations for the types of cameras people should be looking at?
Sure. Yeah. Nowadays, we are pretty lucky that technology has evolved to a point that it's now way easier to take decent adventure photography photos, not only canyoneering, but in general, adventure photography. So nowadays, people have the option to carry their phones. Some of the phones, they are pretty capable, and some of them are waterproof. Or you can upgrade your equipment to digital cameras that they are waterproof and dustproof and shockproof, and they take pretty amazing photos. Olympus has a good line of cameras, and Nikon has a good line of cameras too, that they are waterproof and shockproof and dustproof.
Are there some specific models that you can recommend from either of those companies?
Olympus still is carrying the TG series, which stands for TOF series. And I believe now they are in the 6th iteration. So that's a pretty good camera that shoots raw photography. And it's pretty good. Nikon, I'm not sure if they're still carrying the AW one, that you can exchange lenses. That's also another option. And there are some other cameras, high-end 35 millimeter cameras, that they have some weather sealing, but you really need to be careful. They are not submersible or totally waterproof. But for just people that want to carry some sort of camera into the canyon, and maybe some mid-level as people that aspire to get very good photography, those are two options. If you are a professional, you probably can now update your equipment to mirrorless cameras, but those are not totally waterproof. But at that level, you are delving into more actually documentary or high-end adventure photography, not your casual recreational canyoneer.
So it sounds like you're referring to kind of a spectrum of canyon photographers.
Right. You have people that all they want to do is just capture their trip, have some memories, capture their friends having fun. And you have kind of more aspirational photographers that they want to capture some more professional looking adventure photography, maybe some fine art photography, some landscape photography. And then you have your professionals, right?
So not limited to just canyoneering. I know there's a saying that the best camera is going to be the one that you carry with you. I have a couple of cameras, but it seems like 99% of the photos that I take are with my iPhone. Is it reasonable for people to take their iPhone through canyons and expect to get some decent photos from it?
iPhone and other smartphones, especially the latest models, they have incorporated an array of features that used to be available only post-production. So now all those features like HDR photography, compensation for light, even some motion, vibration dampening, they are all incorporated. And those nowadays the smartphones have become a really capable tool for photography, for sure, and also video. You just need to be extra careful because some of them they are kind of waterproof, but not for certainly shockproof as rough as some of the point and shoots for sure. So you can really damage your phone. So you need to be extra careful if you carry the phone with you into canyons.
Would it be reasonable to carry an iPhone or another smartphone in a waterproof bag and only take it out when you need it?
I have seen people actually carrying those phones in plastic pouches, waterproof plastic pouches that you can hang from your neck or just have it somewhat handy. As long as you are not actually doing a hardcore canyon where you actually need to swim and do hard things, yeah, probably you can have it around. But if you're gonna do something that involves all your attention and all your physical capabilities, even myself, when that is going on, I put the camera away and full attention on the task at hand. If I'm swimming into a hydraulic or going into a heavy flow into a waterfall, that's not the time to be fiddling with phones or carrying your things around your neck for sure.
Understand. So assuming that most canyoneers are not professional photographers, but just want to know enough about photography to take good photos, to post on social media and dazzle all of their friends. And let's say they're in the smartphone to maybe a Canyon TG kind of a budget range. What kind of advice would you have for them to up their game so what they do post on social media they can really be proud of?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'm gonna divide it for smartphone users and someone who has decided to upgrade to a adventure point and shoot camera. For smartphone users, you can the phone is already taking a lot of the technical aspects of the photography out of your hands, so you have more freedom to choose the time of capture the moment. So be really mindful of just capturing actually interesting moments, and the subject. Just you be more selective about the subject. I see a lot of people posting like 20, 30 photos of a canyon, and a handful of them are pretty redundant. Like it's like 5 photos is slightly different angles, right? So be more selective of the moment. Be more mindful of the composition. Even some phones have kind of a cheater grid for thirds composition. So you can read a little bit about good compositions using the rule of thirds and choose your subjects. And and be also very more selective about the photos you post. Usually in a canyon, you don't need to post 70 photos. Probably depending on the canyon, if you select 10 or 20 good photos, that's enough. For people who decide to up their game and carry a adventure point and shoot that has raw photography, take advantage of that. The main thing that is going to separate the phone from these cameras is the fact that you can shoot raw photography and you have a lot of freedom to do post-production of your photos. So if you are doing that, be really mindful. If you're already doing this, be really mindful about same thing, but also about high contrast scenes and shoot to not to get your photos overexposed. So maybe set your camera to spot metering, select your scene and point your spot metering to the highlight of the scene and let the camera shows the exposure for that part of the composition. And if you are a professional, you probably already know all this, and your challenge is not so much on the technical execution of the photo, but the actual technical navigation of the canyon, right?
So Adolfo, I have a smartphone that takes pretty decent photos despite my lack of photography skills. I've never taken it into a canyon, but if I ever chose to, what would be your advice using that phone to optimize the quality of my canyon photographs?
With the phone, there is some things that you can do to actually make sure the photos are getting pretty good quality. Try to point your phone to scenes where there is no direct sunlight, right? So that actually gives the phone a better chance to get a pretty decent exposure without manipulating the photo a lot to compensate for shadows or try to get the sky in actual blue color. So if you have the opportunity to just point the phone towards an area that is not getting hit with direct sunlight, that's a pretty good choice. There is a point in canyons, especially some deep canyons, where there will be very little light, and at some point, it's just not enough light for the phone to take a photo. So be mindful of that there is a limit, or how dark can you go into a canyon and still get a good photo. But just try to choose scenes that they are not high contrast, and that will keep the phone getting a good quality photo.
So in those dark canyons, my phone comes with a flash option. Should I be using it, or is that just going to mess my photos up even more?
Actually, when the flash comes alive, that's an indication that the phone is going, there is not enough light, so I'm going to use a flash. That will be, I use the flash more as a warning, that the light has gone too low. If you are documenting something that it's kind of pretty important, or something that it doesn't have to be good looking, like let's say you are trying to take a photo of an anchor or something like that, by all means, let the flash rip and just get the photo. But usually flash, the color temperature of the light that is emitted by the flash is really unappealing on people and on canyon walls. So it's not, it won't be a pretty photo for sure.
All right. Thank you for that. Good information. So I do have an Olympus TG, like you had mentioned before. I think mine's a Model 5. There's a manual setting on it where I need to know stuff like f-stops and so on and so on. But it's also got some automatic settings. And I don't remember what all of them were. I just remember I can set it to do its own thing if I'm taking a photograph in snow. There's a setting for portraits. I think there's one for action shots. Is there any value in using those automatic settings? And if so, when I'm in a camera, which setting should I lean towards?
All those settings are pretty handy, but if you already took the step of leaving the phone behind and you spend the money and the effort to carry this camera, when you set the camera on those settings, it will actually record those captures as a JPEG file, and you won't have you don't have a lot of you will cut yourself in a lot of the freedom to correct the files. Those are all the preset modes, like a landscape, portrait, landscape, scenery. For that particular camera, it's a really good bet to use either manual, aperture, or the P, which is the program mode. If you want to start with one of those settings and just start finding your way, the P mode, the program mode, it's really good. You will still get your raw file to correct a lot of the settings in the photo in post-production, and the camera will do a pretty good job on high contrast scenes to get a good shot. Probably if you go into a very settings with really low light, you will benefit from stepping out of the P mode. But that's a really good start. Once you step out of that, you are really starting to dive deeper. When you step out of P mode, what happens is you are in really dark canyons, and you're gonna get dark photos. And if you force the camera to still take the photo, the camera will be forced to get a really high ISO setting for the photo, and the photo will be pretty grainy. It's kind of the equivalent in the old school when you will take photos with film ASA 800 and 1600, where it's a very grainy look. So if you at some point get enough technical hump to step out of P mode, what you are controlling is tell the camera, don't shoot anything higher than, let's say, 400 ISO. So you keep a good quality raw file to work with. So yeah, that little camera actually has a lot of settings, and you can dive pretty deep. But if you're gonna start, I will start with the camera in P mode, in program mode.
So if I put my camera in program mode, is it going to look at the scene and do everything for me? It's going to set the shutter speed and the aperture and the ISO. It's going to do everything?
It's going to pick all those settings. It's going to get, depending on your scene composition, it's going to, okay, I'm going to shoot at this speed with this aperture at any given ISO. You can actually help the camera quite a bit if you set the reading for the light for a spot meter, and you point that spot meter in your viewfinder for the brightest point in the scene, and the camera will go, okay, I will optimize my exposure for that. When you look at the file straight out of the camera, it will look that you get a good exposure for the highlight, and maybe the canyon walls are too dark, but that's kind of the beauty of that camera. You can get that file out and use software in post-production to recover the shadows. You can always recover shadows, but you cannot recover overexposed areas. Once you overexpose an area of the composition, it's gone. You can always recover shadows, so that's kind of the strategy for high contrast photography. Do your exposure reading for the highlights and recover the low light areas of the composition.
I think even I understand that now. So I think you've even motivated me to start carrying my Olympus more often in canyons. If I understand your key points, shoot in RAW, set it for program mode, set the light meter for spot metering, and make sure the ISO does not go above 400. Are those the key points?
You got it all correct, but if you are shooting in program mode, the camera will pick the ISO for you.
If it wants to choose something too high and I don't want it to go above 400, do I need to switch to one of the other modes?
Yeah, you probably are. If, let's say, I'm going to Pine Creek and that really dark area of the canyon, I usually step out of P mode and I go, I limit my ISO and I tell the camera to shoot at the maximum aperture, which is 1.4, and you get pretty decent pictures that way, which is another really nice thing about that camera that I haven't mentioned, that the lens on that camera, the fixed lens, is a 1.4 aperture, which is pretty good for a small camera.
Wow. So Adolfo, one of my frustrations taking photos of my friends in canyons is if I'm down at the bottom before then, I get some nice butt shots. If I'm going down after them and I'm up at the top, sometimes the only way you can get a good shot of them is to get dangerously close to the edge looking down. Now, obviously, that's a safety concern. Are there some other safety concerns people should be aware of if they're focusing too much on photography and not to the technical nature of the canyon?
You covered already probably the top of the list in terms of safety concerns. While guiding, that was one of the major aspects that as a guide you needed to take into account. Customers or clients getting way too concerned with a good photo and getting too close to the edge at the top, or interfering at the bottom, trying to distract their companion with a turn around and smile or do this or do that. So yeah, for sure, photography, when it becomes when it takes a higher priority of the actual technical aspect of the canyon, photography itself can become a risk. Introduces risk when people place the priority of taking a photo higher than be wary of the risk that the environment they are in, which is in a canyon. So for sure, establish safe zones at the top so people don't get too close to the edge. And at the bottom, also establish safe zones where they are not distracting the person on rope and they are not in a zone where they have debris falling on them. If you are either a leader or a guide and you can exert some control over those things and just start telling people where are the good photo opportunities during the canyon and manage those. If you are just with a group of friends, everybody just need to be at the same level of awareness and be more responsible and not distract. And actually, very good adventure photography is just that. Just capture a really good moment when someone is doing something adventurous, and not what some people attempt to do, which is kind of candid photography, or more on that area. But yeah, people really need to be mindful that photography done wrong can introduce unnecessary risk into canyoneering.
You know, one of the things that's common in technical rescue is using something called an edge kit.
Mm-hmm.
I have a product I call the CRT haul line that has a sewn eye on one end for a carabiner.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily clip that carabiner to an anchor, rig yourself with a rappelling device or a prusik on the line, and use it to protect yourself going all the way to the edge and even a little bit over the edge.
Yeah, sure. Actually, that type of setup when guiding is a great setup, not only to take photos, but actually to manage the anchor. When the anchor seems to sit far back from the edge, that's a great way for the guy or the lead to place themselves at the edge and always have visual contact with the client or your teammate. And in a lot of the outings when I was guiding, I will use that setup to actually, the clients will give me their phones, they will go over the edge, and I will be the one just taking the photos of as the client goes down. And in that way, you are fully in control and you are giving them instruction and you are keeping control of the belay. And yeah, that's a great way to take a great action photo from the top of the rappel.
Awesome. So your clients are getting a combination canyon guide and professional photographer.
Right.
I hope they're paying extra.
Some of them did pretty well.
Good. So far, we've been talking about taking pretty photos to save and share memories. But I've been noticing that people post other photos on social media, not just pretty photos, but photos of anchors, photos of webbing, photos of different types of rigging, and so on. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's actually another long-standing, pretty pragmatic, novel use of the medium photography. It's just photography as a tool to document things. In this case, just documenting canyons. Nowadays, a lot of canyoneers use photos to do condition reports. It's a very thing that people are really want to know now. Just give me the latest condition reports and photos, as they say. One image is 1,000 words. So using your photos to document the condition of the conditions of the canyon, water levels, the condition of the anchors, new anchors, and old anchors that had been cut or moved. Yeah, photography is a really, really good way to document the current state of the canyons, the current wear and tear of things that, how canyons are getting damaged by certain practices. Yeah, all photography is a really good way to document all those things.
So, Adolfo, let's wrap up this photography episode with a conversation that might be a little controversial. Let's talk about being a responsible photographer. Back when I started canyoneering, I never encountered photos of canyons anywhere. But then sometime in the very late 1980s or early 1990s, I was walking through an REI in Phoenix, Arizona, in the book section, and the front cover of a book caught my eye. There was a photograph there of a canyon in Arizona called Salome. I remember my blood boiling a little bit, thinking when people start seeing these photographs of these beautiful canyons, they're going to become overrun and they won't be my private canyons anymore. Maybe it's gotten even worse now because of digital photography. It's within reach of just about anybody. And some digital cameras even have a feature called geotagging. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's that's something that gets people attention and seems to be divisive. Yes, both digital photography, when you get your digital files out of either your smartphone or some digital cameras, there is something in each file called metadata, and it's basically a portion of the file that is a little table, like a little spreadsheet. That's how it looks. And that little metadata has information about the date, the time, the exposure, the ISO, the aperture, the speed, all the settings that the camera used to take that photo. But along on that data, there is some cameras that come equipped with GPS data. They have the coordinates where the photo was taken. So if you are not careful and you post to social media or you share that file, and there is a lot of software out there, and for sure social media, it will attempt to extract the coordinates and just place that photo on a map as a convenient feature. So for canyoneers, if when you are sharing those photos and you don't strip the metadata for those photos, you are disclosing where the photos were taken. So yeah, if you really want to, you are exploring or you are not ready to share, be volunteering that information actually in the open. Yeah, be really careful with the metadata and the geotagging for the files, and you can disable, depending on your device, just look for the instructions. There are settings to disable the geotagging, or keep the geotagging for your personal use, but when you share it, there is also another setting where you strip the geotagging from the sharing. I believe even there was in the last 5 or 7 years, conservation-minded organizations did a little PSA telling people that to include the strip geotagging as part of the Leave No Trace, to make an effort to conservation effort now includes inadvertently disclosing the geotagging of some locations. So yeah, be responsible with your sharing of those files, and make sure you are stripping the geotagging from your files.
Wow. Secret canyons and gatekeeping. That's a subject for another podcast episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Adolfo, I really appreciate you taking your time to be on this episode with me and sharing your knowledge about canyoneering photography. If you would like to check out some of Adolfo's amazing photos or follow him on social media, search for him by name on the internet, Facebook, or Instagram. Adolfo Isassi. His last name is spelled Isassi. Bonus material for this episode is available in the podcast section of my website. Check it out at canyonsandcrags.com.
Thank you for joining us at the Canyoneering Karma podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, have fun, be safe.